To be precise, when Somalia's president sits down in Mogadishu with an international broadcaster and praises China's role in Somalia's development, this is not diplomacy for applause. It's a power conversation. Because the real question after decades of conflict is not who will help Somalia rebuild. The real question is who gets to decide how Somalia rebuilds and who doesn't. In a recent Leaders Talk interview, Somali President, His Excellency Dr. Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, spoke openly about Somalia's reconstruction, China's consistent support since independence, and what it means to rebuild without surrendering sovereignty. And remember, if you want more Africa First stories the Western media ignores, hit subscribe. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why Somalia is discussing China now, and how permission politics quietly shape post-conflict recovery. Recovery isn't about help, it's about who can't block you.
Can you specify on the commonalities?
The commonality, for one example, is the one China principle and one China, one Somalia principle, the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Somalia and China, which both of us has some people who's claiming that they do not respect that. So China has always been consistently in support of Somali unity, and it was very clear their support and their stand. China has always been with us, and we always have been with them. We never recognized Taiwan, and China has the capacity, the military capacity and the military might to bring back Taiwan. China went through a difficult era in its history and has survived it and has even later on prospered. Somalia has difficulty in that. So the commonality we had is in some areas the China approach is useful to Somalia, and we are looking at those how to survive and prosper. There's a very, very rich experience in China, and China is open for that purpose, and they have been providing us insights and the civilization that resisted this. So this is again not only the sovereignty and the territorial integrity, but also the respect of our two countries to each other. We've never had any problem with China whatsoever. In the last 65 years, the relationship was steady, straight line. It was not, there was no up and downs in the last 65 years. So that is that shows that there is a certain basic commonality that we cannot divert or alleviate each other.
So here is what actually happened. China Media Group's Leaders Talk host Li Pichun traveled to Mogadishu to conduct an in-depth interview with President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. The details matter. This wasn't a summit hallway soundbite. This wasn't a donor conference podium. This was a head of state conversation on Somali soil. In the interview, three things were made explicit. Firstly, Somalia is actively engaged in national reconstruction after decades of conflict. Secondly, China has provided consistent support since Somalia's independence and not episodic attention. Thirdly, the Somalia-China relationship is framed as a strategic partnership, not a rescue operation. This was not nostalgia, it was memory used as strategy. And yes, cue the familiar Western reaction, why is Somalia talking to China? Or better question, why are they talking to them now, right? So why is Africa expected to forget who has stayed consistent? And the trust factor here is audiences are trained to assume that Somalia is leaning east. China's expanding its influence, a zero-sum geopolitical move, right? That framing protects one assumption, that post-conflict African states must rebuild inside approved lanes. But the truth here is that the interview doesn't announce a pivot, it exposes a contrast. Somalia spent decades operating within systems that fund stabilization but restrict transformation, manage risk but delay autonomy, treat sovereignty as conditional based on compliance, right? So China's relevance here is not ideology, it's experience. China rebuilt after devastation while retaining policy autonomy, rejecting external supervision of national direction, and prioritizing long-term capacity over short-term approval. So that experience is useful to us in Somalia, not sacred, right? So this matters beyond Somalia. This interview matters because it publicly normalizes something African leaders are often discouraged from doing, comparing development systems out loud. That's the disruption, right? So when Africa asks who controls the blueprint, suddenly everyone gets nervous. So let's talk about material impacts, not symbolism, right? So Somalia's reconstruction logic, it's not Somalia's reconstruction challenge isn't the vision, it's constraint. So infrastructure requires financing without policy capture. Security requires cooperation without trusteeship. And development requires timelines not being dictated by donor optics, by highlighting China's consistency since independence. Somalia is signaling this clearly, right? Partnerships are welcome. Supervision is not. So that posture reshapes how Somalia's negotiations go, like quietly but decisively. So this is a regional signal for us as well, because across Africa, post-conflict and post-adjacent or post-adjustment states are watching. So not because China is the only template, but because permission-based rebuilding has a ceiling. So Somalia articulating this on record lowers the cost for others to do the same. So here's the uncomfortable reality. If African countries begin treating development models as options, but not obligations, then influence becomes something you earn, not inherit. So apparently Africa, reading the manual, is a geopolitical instability conflict, right? Or a crisis. So let's look at what comes next. So short term, more explicit state to state language, right? Less aid narrative, more reconstruction logic, greater diversification of technical partners. That's the short term. And now long term, Africa decouples cooperation from control. So sovereignty is assumed and not delayed. Post-conflict recovery becomes strategic, not ceremonial. And this builds on what we've covered in earlier Africa Power reports, because Africa is not rejecting the world. Africa is rejecting vetoes disguised as support. And so the next headlines will frame this as alignment anxiety, what it really is, African states exercising comparative judgment. So here's the truth, clean and grounded, right? Somalia's conversation with China is not about choosing sides. It's about rebuilding without supervision and remembering who has respected our sovereignty and our continuity. So, mashallah, that's your African Insight for today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because I'm Mr. Empower TV. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth behind them. This is Mr. Empower, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.